I'm John Staley, member of the Lawson Center, volunteer, and we're sitting here today in a December day in 2012 with Bruce Johnson, who's a member and a volunteer at the Lawson Center, and Jeff Kelderhouse, who's a volunteer at the Lawson Center. Today we want to talk about muskie guiding on Chautauqua Lake. It was a big industry years ago in which the muskies were, many of them raised by the state back then, and brought lots of people to the lake. So there were numerous fishing guides, muskie guides on the lake. And one of the main ones, probably the most popular and famous one, was Spike Kelderhouse. And Spike was a very interesting, colorful character, and known by many people on the lake. And so we thought it'd be good to include this in the Lawson Center history on the lake. And Bruce Johnson was a guide with Spike Kelderhouse and worked for him for many years fishing muskie. And then Jeff, his son, is also an outdoorsman and worked for his father and in the guide business and the many things that Spike did. So today our purpose is to talk about Spike and give you a little more insight into the guides that hunted the muskies on Chautauqua Lake.
My dad was born in Angola, New York, on August 25th, 1921. He was the middle child of Irving Kelderhouse and Loretta Kelderhouse. They moved here when he was about, I would guess, at 12 years of age from Angola. And he lived to be 82 years of age, died in 2002. And he fished pretty much every 80 years of his life. I recall seeing a picture of him with one of the first fish he caught, and I remember my grandmother telling me about one of his first times at fishing, and they lived in Angola at the time, and my grandmother found him with a stick and a string, and I don't know what was on the end of the string, but he was fishing in a ditch alongside the road that had water in it. So
I thought it was a safety pin.
It might not have even had a hook on it at all, but those were his days of fishing. A lot of people never knew who Donald Eugene Kelderhouse was. At the age of about a year and a half to 2, somewhere along the line, his dad, my grandfather, started calling him Spike. And for what reason, I don't know. But a lot of people don't know who Don E. Kelderhouse is.
What year would he have moved here then, to this area?
Right around 1934.
Okay.
The family moved here. My grandmother and grandfather, the whole family moved into the home down by the hatchery.
Time went on, the war broke out. What was his military service?
He enlisted into the U.S. Army Air Force for a 4-year stint. He was pretty much involved with the European theater. His older brother Richard served in the Pacific theater. And of course my dad ended up being an aircraft mechanic.
Okay.
They patched up bombers in Greenland. He came back from the war with a handful of bonds, war bonds, and he started buying speedboats. And in the meantime, I recall a little thing in my mother's yearbook about meeting this guy up on the lake, and that they met at the Midway Park roller rink, and like a lot of folks did at that time.
Yes, yeah.
And somewhere along the line, he convinced her to marry him, and I'd almost have to say he took hostage of her, but I'm sure that he promised that there was a lot of great things in front of him. She wasn't involved too much with the speedboats. My dad's sister was involved with the speedboats. But as soon as they were married, my dad bought a 1947 Chris-Craft that was built locally here in the Jamestown Faulkner plant. And he put her to work. He put her in that boat and made a fishing guide out of her right alongside of him.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And how many children then?
There ended up being 8 children. The first being born in 1949, my sister Jean.
And what about the Jays? How did that all come into being?
You know, I don't know. I don't know where they came up with that idea, but you know, Jane, Jerry, Jeff, Jed, Jess, Jevin, Jevin, Gerald, Jeyryl, and Jarrett, Jerrett. I couldn't tell you.
At what point did your parents buy the hotel?
I remember as a child going up there with my dad in the fall of '57 and knowing that they were trying to make a purchase agreement. They started operating in '58.
And that was a Whiteside?
The Whiteside Hotel in Maple Springs.
Springs.
Yeah. It's up the lake from Bemis by about 3 miles.
How many people could that accommodate roughly back then?
Well, it had 42 rentable rooms, and the dining room would seat 110. When people ate at the dining room, they all sat down at the same time, and everybody had their own.
And everybody's talking and conversing and...
It was just, and they, as it was, most of the people came at the same time each year, and so they met the same people from year to year to year.
And that was right on the water.
Right on the water.
So then he had could have some boats there, boat operation there
Yes.
somewhat.
Yes, and in fact, my dad apparently had seen what was available at that time because the gentleman that they bought, the family that they bought it from, were doing exactly the same. They had a Chris-Craft that they had parked in front of the hotel, and it was used for taking guest fishing or an evening boat ride or an afternoon boat ride or whatever Mr. Haskins was up to.
Russell Haskins.
R.H. Haskins,
Yeah.
Russell H. Haskins,
Yeah.
grand old man.
Yeah. His fishing operations, where did it, one was obviously in front of the Whiteside, then there was another operation down here.
His first dock was right close to the ferry. He went and moved from there to in front of the Lenhart Hotel at the end of the breakwall. He served many, many years in front of the Lenhart. And then in later years, he moved up to where Doc Lindblom had what was a restaurant, which ended up being a surf club, and then Lindblom's Cottages. He had a dock there for quite a long time.
Okay. Spike was also involved in other things, community service, and he was in the fire department and was the fire chief. The personality of Spike was very energetic and very colorful, but extremely friendly and a big smile and always interacting with people, so everybody loved him.
Yes. He loved Bemis Point, and he promoted Bemis Point. He promoted the tourist industry in the Bemis Point area. Early pictures of him when he was at the ages of 30. And you would always see him in a t-shirt on board the boat somewhere, one of his boats, that said Bemis Point on it.
Do you remember a television promotion program or almost like a documentary on the lake? And there was some concerns about the quality of the water, which at that point probably wasn't all that good.
I knew what they were alluding to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I always remember Spike and his dynamic personality, sitting on the edge of the cruiser, talking to people and talking to the camera. It was just like on the movies, and he has a glass and he reaches down, fills the glass with the lake water, and drinks it and says, see, there's nothing the matter with this water.
No.
True story.
I remember
Very
that
true.
like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
The energy level
High.
was unbelievable.
High.
He ran everywhere.
He held a Chautauqua County 1 mile record for a long time before it was broken. And he loved to run, he loved to stay in shape. He was one of these gentlemen that, he ate well.
There was one time when I was down there at the dock, and somehow some young man found out, and I don't even remember who he was, but he couldn't have been at that time probably 20 or 22 years old, and your dad was in his 40s, and they got talking about running, and who could outrun who. And your dad, to challenge this kid, who was evidently a pretty fast runner.
Younger than Spike then.
Oh,
by a lot.
younger than his son.
Yeah.
And they went up to the end of the dock and stood in the road, and Spike says, "I'll race you to the streetlight." And when Spike took off, and he just outran that kid just like nothing. He was extremely fast. And he got up to the street and looked back, and this kid was still coming. He just outran him. And the kid, if I remember correctly, walked back, and your dad ran back.
Yeah.
But that's how fast he was.
I remember it later in years when he was working, bagging groceries and et cetera at the old quality markets, and well into his 70s then, and I saw him one day going in there, and he's complaining. He said, my knee's going on me, Johnny, and my back's hurting, Johnny, and I said, well, looks like you're doing good to me, Spike. And as I was going out, I heard somebody yell at me in the car, "I'll see you, Johnny." And I looked, and your father's pushing about 10 carts, running them into the quality markets. Just an amazing amount of energy. Never quit.
No. He, like you said, he took care of himself. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but
Good habits.
it was good habits, and like you said, his energy levels were always high. My dad had fun in his whole life.
Yeah. Let's zero in on the fishing operation. Brucey, this is probably a good place for you to come in because Jeff was still a young guy when you were working with Spike. Kind of go through the beginning of it.
I remember being, after being on the boats for 3 or 4 years, one morning he came down and he said, "Bruce," he said, "Norma's not feeling well this morning." I don't remember which one that was, but he said, "You're gonna have to take this gentleman all by yourself." And I looked at him and I said, "By myself?" I was 14 years old.
14 years old.
14 years old.
You weren't afraid
On the Well IB, which was the boat that was made in the Jamestown Faulkner plant, a 26-foot semi-enclosed cruiser, which was a wonderful boat for fishing because it had a permanent top on it and it had some bunks in it, and the back was all open and the sides were what they call fold-up, roll-up side curtains, and they were nothing but canvas with plexiglass in them. So the boat offered an awful lot of room, and for fishing parties and running 4 lines, 4 people was the ideal size party, but there could take up to 6. I started actually at 10 years old going out with Jeff's mom, steering the boat and checking lines. Norma was an extremely good muskie guy. She was a real pretty, smart little sweet girl who knew what she was doing. And she came from Jamestown.
So Norma, your mom was a Jamestown girl.
Yes.
What was her maiden name?
Beckstrand.
Beckstrand.
Yeah.
Yep.
She was the daughter of, the middle daughter of
Carl.
Annie and Carl Beckstrand, lived on Willard Street.
Well, trolling was the basic concept of running an artificial lure behind the boat. There were many, many different kinds. However, Spike always used the double jointed pikey minnow. And there was a certain size pikey that offered the best action, and we would get those plugs new and run them in the water to make sure we were getting darn good action on them. And we ran 2 stern lines off the back of the boat, which were about 4 to 4.5 foot in length. And then we called them outriggers off the side of the boat. So in reality, you control 4 lines if you didn't turn too sharp, and you could tell how well that lure was working because the tip of the rod would dance or vibrate. Pikey minnows were probably about 6 inches long,
Broken in the middle.
broken in the middle, glass eyes and a lip. And I don't remember the year, of course, but the first ones didn't have a real large lip on them. And then Creek Chub, who made the lure, came out with the Deep Diver, and it was a large, wider and longer nose on it. And if you got that lure adjusted just right, it would literally dance out there. It was just a fabulous running lure. Then, of course, when the Deep Divers came out, you could buy the new lip, and there was a little set screw on top of where the nose would be on the fish, and you could change a regular nose piece, change it and put a deep diver one in. And
So you could modify, you worked on those, modified them.
Oh, yeah.
Tuned them.
Maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
Tuned them.
Fine tuned them. Fine tuned them, exactly.
You could, they were joined in the middle by two eyelets, and they were screwed into the wood body. To get it to run as smooth as you could get it to run, you would either back those screws out, maybe one turn is all, or you might bring them back in again, depending on, and then you would tune that lip, you would bend it down. I know some guys that would try to bend the sides up. My dad didn't ever bend the sides up on. It was either up or down. And
Or a little twist.
a little bit of a
A
twist.
little bit of a twist.
A little bit of a twist. And
We also backed out, there was a treble hook off the bottom
Mhm.
of the front section of the lure,
back that.
and a section in the back, and then one on the tail. And we would back those out just one turn. And that seemed to improve the.
So you're removing the hook a little bit from the
Just
body.
You allowed the hook to lay
Yeah.
up a little flat
I see.
on the body, otherwise with it being up tight, it hung down a little bit. When you got a lure that ran really good, you took care of it. And those favorites, and I've got pictures of the boats, they hung them all up in front of the pilot, the co-pilot seat
On wires. Easy
on
to-
wires, or in later, my dad didn't even bother putting a piece of wire up there, he just stuck the hook into the
wood.
into the wood. Every year, H.L. Peters salesman would come and he would sit in the house and spend a half a day making up a tackle order.
Wow. And what about the color scheme?
My dad liked bright colors. And
Except I was always under the impression that muskies were colorblind. I don't know that for sure, but
The
it
muskies
seemed
never
like there
told me.
were. What's that?
Muskie's never told me about
No.
that. My dad was.
Well,
He was
yeah,
colorblind?
we knew that.
He wasn't totally colorblind.
Oh.
He would look at something that was brown and he thought it was baby blue, or just the opposite. He was noted for running red lights. They had all names for all these.
Some of the names you wouldn't ever want to publish.
No, Bumblebee.
Oh yeah, the
Clown.
redhead,
Coach
rainbow.
Rainbow.
Well, then there was one with the red and black body with dots on it, and I didn't want to tell you the name we had for that. It was.
Then, how was the rigging? How was it rigged?
The muskie's mouth is got thousands of teeth in it, and they're razor sharp. That leader protected your fishing gear, allowed you to keep the fish on the line because it didn't allow the fish to wreck that part of the apparatus.
Well, in those days it was nylon line, and if that line got anywhere in that fish's mouth, he could
Saw
put
right
down like that and
Yeah.
be gone. You'd lose lure,
Yeah. Everything.
a hunk of lead that was used to put the lure down, depending on what depth of water you wanted it. And so your dad and I made up our own
Or leaders.
leaders.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
They-
then you put a weight on there.
So it was the lure, the leader, and whatever weight you wanted, and
And
then
then your line.
to a 350, 400 feet of line.
A typical setup was either nylon or Dacron fishing line. And in his industry, they would buy heavy stuff only because it would hold up.
Exactly.
80-pound braided Dacron trolling line. Now, the only reason it ended up being 80-pound, and it was, you would cut your fingers off trying to break, you would not break it. And it was braided in Dacron, is that it just held up from all the use it got. The line took the biggest beating of them all. In fact, the line was so strong it would actually wear the guides right, it would groove the guides right out on the rods. And then you had to have swivels that had ball bearings, or they had to be so that they didn't, your fishing gear didn't wind itself up, and your lure. And it didn't take special knots or anything like that. My dad never used any of these fishing knots. He just tied everything into a bowl.
And those reels were made by Penn?
Penn in Ocean City.
Yeah, Ocean City.
They weren't flashy, you know, they were just, all they were is a winch.
Well, they had what they call a star drag.
Star drags and...
So you would set the tension, and if a muskie hit, you had the tension set just right, so if that muskie hit with the speed of the boat at about 5 miles an hour, that lure didn't tear the lure right out of the muskie's
It
mouth.
was soft set.
This star drag was like a clutch, and you set it so if that fish hit, he could take line out, and it would be nothing on a big fish for him to peel off 25, 30 feet of line. And that's when the person would pick the rod up out of the rod holder and start bringing that fish in. And
What would the other people do then at that point? The other rods, what do you,
we
would you
bring
leave them? or-
the next closest rod in. So if the fish did this, it wouldn't tangle. So, but on the other side of the boat, you could
You could leave that outrigger out there. The outrigger
slow the boat down a little bit, but you'd see people, we'd tell them to just wind steady.
Don't pump it.
Don't horse the fish, don't give them any slack, and that's what that star drag did, it didn't allow slack. And people would be winding, and all of a sudden they would look and see line going off the bail of the reel. Don't worry about that.
Don't quit.
That's what you want.
Don't quit.
Purpose of the drag.
That's the fun part.
Don't quit.
And eventually that fish is gonna tire and you're gonna gain on him. And it'd be, you could spend 5-10 minutes on a muskie bringing it in if you really got a good fighter. And that was the fun.
Yeah. That's what hooks you.
Yeah.
That's what gets you.
It was a tremendous
rush.
adrenaline rush.
So Bruce, you started off with a 26-foot,
Semi-enclosed Chris crab.
and that was made in the
Jamestown
Faulkner.
Faulkner plant, yeah.
And then,
That came before I did.
okay.
But when I started, I was on that boat, and then subsequently, when I was doing that as a kid, and then worked into it full-time after I graduated from high school for a few years, and still ran the Well IB, it was called, and then later on, got bigger boats.
Another Chris, yeah.
Yeah.
So you had that one when you started at that time. Then you had two of those larger boats at that time?
Spike had a 26-footer that belonged to Russell Haskins, who owned the Whiteside. So at that time, for many years, it was two 26-footers.
I see.
And to go back just a little bit, we would start fishing at 9 o'clock, fish till 1, come in for an hour, go back out and fish
Till 6.
from 2 till 6, come back in and have something to eat, and then there would be people on the Lenhart dock, down on the dock, saying we want to go for a boat ride.
Evening ride.
Oh,
And it worked out great because it was the days before alternators, and all day long, that battery was discharging because of
Generator.
a generator. And that hour boat ride, or sometimes 2-hour boat ride,
Bring them up.
charged that battery back up for the next day. So in theory, I had very little battery problem.
yeah.
And it was because he would take a boat ride.
Evening boat
And
ride.
it was $1 a person for an hour. Minimum of 6.
Yeah.
But yes, you maybe burned a couple gallons of gas, but the real good part of it was you were charging that battery up and saving you from
Sure.
putting chargers on at night.
Yeah.
No electricity down on the dock in those days.
The cabin cruisers, whether it be in pretty much semi-enclosed, that's what Chris Craft would call them. He had a boat, had a larger cabin on it. It was like a sport fisherman. The boat's name was GG&G.
We talk about the double cabin?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that wasn't a huge boat, it just didn't have, it had too much room down under. This was a good heavy boat for fishing, because in those days they had big keels on them, and boy, in the wind you could tell it was a good heavy wooden boat.
Yeah.
But gradually, after that, built up to 28 footers and 29 footers. Same style of boat, semi-enclosed,
Yeah.
permanent top, side curtains. Then they went to twin engine.
Twin screw.
You'd use one engine in the morning and the other
Oh,
engine in the
okay.
afternoon. You balanced those, we didn't have hour meters on them in those days, but 4 hours here and 4 hours there, it was pretty easy to keep the engines pretty well evened out.
The single screws they're not the easiest to fish with. So they went to twin screws in the middle, in the late 50s. That 28 footer, both Bruce and I ran quite a bit, was one of the last twin screws he owned. And
Plus,
great boats,
that's what Chris went into.
Yeah.
They went into
twin screws.
from 26s up to 28s, 29s, went from singles to twin engine, and it was still the best design boat.
Yeah.
And these newer ones were the same design, just they were wider and they were longer and they were heavier and they had tremendous keels on them.
Yeah. Nothing floats like a piece of wood.
Uh-huh.
And in the water, you take rough water, that wooden boat would hold its course. I recall many times where if I was out on, there was a chop on the lake, I would lift the hatch, the floor hatch, pull a seacock, and a lot of people say, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm adding water to the boat." I would put another 2 or 3 inches of water
So
in the boat.
ballast in there.
It just dropped that whole boat down into the water and it would hold its line up. It gave it more draft.
Yeah.
And it put, like Bruce was saying, that large keel would put that large keel down in the water a little further and it would hold its course a little bit. You didn't want to have to be continually steering that boat the whole time. In fact, the boats were set up that they had a rear steer. They had a steer stick so that you could sit at the back of the boat in the open area, the open deck, with the clientele and steer the boat from there so you didn't have to be, and that's where your fishing rods were at.
Let's finish up with, I think, probably one of the biggest credits to Spike. The boat accident, in which Spike heroically saved the lives of many people.
In 1964.
I think it was
On
around
the evening of 4th of July, one of the great things to do is to go out on the lake after dark and watch the fireworks and the flare exhibitions. The lake is full of boats. At Long Point, which is a funnel where boats come in 2 ways or both the same way, two cruisers, 2 pleasure craft, large ones, came together at a high rate of speed. One of the families was a good friend of my dad's. And in fact, both families were well known in the
Yes.
area. And the Pembridge boat and the Lewis boat, they came together and they hit with enough force.
a violent collision.
Violent, very violent. A lot of people involved. The Pembridge boat had the entire Pembridge family in it, which was a large family.
Little kids.
Little kids. I don't recall how many were in the Lewis boat, but they hit hard enough that both boats sank. Or decided to start to sink. Many people were hurt badly. Him and his brother, Richard, Uncle Dick, were close by, and they heard it. They heard it crash. And the next thing they knew, they could hear people screaming for help. So my dad instinctively shut the engines down. And K9, you would have K9, twin screw, and he started to talk to the people that were screaming for help because they didn't know where they were at. Well, sooner or later, they came upon the boats that were sinking and all these people in the water. And they started plucking them out, and they got help from other boats. 14 people were involved in a boat accident that night. And my dad wasn't a hero. My dad happened to be the man in the right place at the right time.
With the right knowledge.
But
With the right instincts.
knew what to do.
Saved them all.
Saved them all. The boats, Pembroke's boat went to the bottom. Another boat got a hold of Dr. Lewis's boat and they towed it to shore somewhere. But a lot of tragedy was averted that night.
Yes.
It happened to be my dad was there, and it's funny that you mentioned this because I was reading a letter today and that my dad got a commendation from Governor Rockefeller for that. And I recall going as a kid, as a whole family, we went to the Hotel Jamestown when that commendation was awarded to him. And I grew up with the Pembroke kids, and so did you, John, they probably wouldn't have been here.
No.
But my dad wasn't a hero. He was a boatman, he was a lake man, and when people are like that,
But to know what to do, to know the water, to know boats, that's what.
shutting that engine down, shutting those engines
It
down.
couldn't have happened to a more responsible, knowledgeable lake person in the world than your dad.
Great way to finish, talking about Spike Kelderhouse and life on the lake. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, John, and
That was
appreciate it. Our family appreciates it.